Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, pre-1942, World War II and UFOs. The Crucible of Berkeley, the birth of plutonium and the Atomic-UFO Nexus. In 1942, plutonium was practically a brand new scientific frontier. The discovery and isolation of the element by chemist Glenn T. Seaborg and his colleagues Edwin McMillan, Joseph Kennedy, and Arthur Wall at the University of California, Berkeley, stands as one of the most pivotal milestones in 20th century science. Working in late 1940 and early 1941 at the Berkeley Radiation Laboratory, the team utilized Ernest Lawrence's massive 60-inch cyclotron to bombard uranium target material with deuterons, the nuclei of heavy hydrogen atoms. Through this meticulous transmutation of uranium, they isolated element 94, plutonium, unlocking a microscopic synthesis of plutonium-239 that proved to be a fissionable material far more volatile and efficient than uranium alone. Though the Berkeley laboratory was grounded entirely in rigorous academic physics and chemistry, its output triggered a chain reaction that went far beyond earthly facilities. The moment humanity successfully manufactured and isolated artificial fissile isotopes, an invisible line was crossed. The breakthrough at Berkeley set into motion the industrial-scale plutonium production at Hanford, Washington, the weapon design works at Los Alamos, and the Trinity detonation, forming the exact geographical and operational corridor that simultaneously drew an unprecedented wave of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, sightings. From the pre-war coastal radar anomalies of 1940 to 1941 along the West Coast to the persistent luminous disks shadowing atomic installations, the scientific milestones achieved at institutions like the Berkeley Rad Lab acted as an energetic beacon, alerting an external intelligence to humanity's entry into the nuclear age. Identifying element 94. This nuclear reaction initially produced an isotope of neptunium, element 93, which then underwent beta decay to transform into element 94. On the night of February 23 to 24, 1941, the team formally synthesized and identified plutonium-238. Shortly thereafter, they successfully produced and identified plutonium-239 using neutron bombardment. On March 28, 1941, Seaborg, Kennedy, and physicist Emilio Segre tested the newly minted Pu-239 isotope and made a discovery that altered the course of World War II. They proved that plutonium-239 was fissionable with slow neutrons, mirroring the theoretical properties of uranium-235. This proved that plutonium was not just an academic periodic table curiosity, but a viable, highly efficient explosive material, capable of sustaining a nuclear chain reaction. In early 1941, the total amount of plutonium in existence could not be weighed on a standard scale or even seen with the naked eye. It existed only as invisible, microscopic trace amounts mixed into target residues inside laboratory glassware. Famously, because alpha radiation from small amounts of early plutonium cannot penetrate skin or thin cardboard, Seaborg kept early samples tucked away safely in a humble wooden cigar box, now preserved in the Smithsonian Institution. It was not until August 20, 1942, at the University of Chicago's Metallurgical Laboratory, that Seaborg's team successfully isolated plutonium in a visible amount for the very first time, and not until September 1942 that it was first weighed. This microscopic breakthrough at Berkeley directly triggered the massive engineering undertaking of the Manhattan Project, shifting the theoretical physics of a university laboratory into the industrial-scale production reactors, built at Hanford, Washington, just a couple of years later. In 1942, the United States was only just beginning to structure the Manhattan Project to figure out how to produce it in industrial quantities. While the historic work to isolate plutonium was actively underway at the University of California, Berkeley during 1941 and 1942, public records and declassified military files do not highlight specific, widely documented local UFO or UAP sightings directly in Berkeley proper during that exact window. Instead, high strangeness reports across Northern California and the broader Pacific coast during those early war years primarily manifested as offshore radar echoes. Early warning SCR-270 radar units deployed along the northern and southern California coasts frequently logged unidentified, fast-moving returns coming off the Pacific, which military intelligence routinely filed away under unverified or classified briefs. Wartime air defense panic. The regional psychological and military climate was hyper-focused on potential Japanese air raids or submarine attacks, culminating dramatically down the coast in the February 1942 Battle of Los Angeles, rather than in the immediate East Bay or Berkeley academic sector. The true intersection between Berkeley's scientific output and the UFO phenomenon wasn't a localized sighting over the campus in 1941 or 42. But rather the long-term chain reaction that the Rad Lab's plutonium breakthrough set into motion, spurring industrial production at Hanford and triggering decades of anomalous surveillance across America's nuclear corridors. Japan's own wartime nuclear research programs, such as the Army's NEGO project and the Navy's FGO project, which did not officially start until 1943, were heavily bottlenecked. They suffered from severe shortages of raw materials, lack of industrial infrastructure, and constant disruptions from Allied bombing. Japanese scientists never came close to producing plutonium or building an atomic bomb. The association between submarines, Axis nuclear materials, and Japan often stems from a famous historical event that occurred at the very end of the war in May 1945, 3 years after 1942. The German long-range cargo submarine U-234 set sail from Norway, bound for Japan carrying advanced military technology, jet fighter blueprints, and 560 kilograms, about 1,200 pounds of uranium oxide packed in lead-lined containers. However, U-234 never made it to Japan. When Nazi Germany surrendered in May 1945, the submarine surrendered to the U.S. Navy in the Atlantic Ocean. The uranium oxide on board was crude, unrefined material, not weapons-grade enriched uranium or plutonium, and it was confiscated by the United States, entering the American atomic stockpile. While the 2 Japanese naval officers traveling aboard the submarine committed suicide. Japan had no atomic bombs or plutonium in 1942, and the famous attempt to ship nuclear precursor materials via German submarine happened in 1945. And was intercepted by the Allies before it ever reached them. Uranium oxide, enrichment facilities, and the global UAP grid. The connection between uranium oxide, commonly known as yellow cake or refined precursor powder, and unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP rests at the heart of early Atomic-era security logs. While plutonium production at Hanford captured dramatic attention in the Pacific Northwest, the massive industrial footprint required to mine, mill, and enrich uranium oxide created an equally compelling magnet for high strangeness. During the Manhattan Project, the vast installation at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, designated as the Clinton Engineer Works, was dedicated to the monumental task of uranium enrichment, separating the rare, fissionable uranium-235 isotope from stable uranium-238. Facilities like the Y-12 electromagnetic separation plant and the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant consume staggering amounts of electricity and processed massive quantities of uranium compounds daily. The immense electromagnetic fields generated by the calatrons at Oak Ridge and the chemical processing plants handling tons of uranium oxide created localized atmospheric and electromagnetic anomalies that registered heavily on military monitoring equipment. Just as radar installations and civilian witnesses tracked disc-shaped objects over Washington's plutonium production corridors, the skies over America's primary uranium processing centers experienced a parallel surge of unexplained activity, restricted airspace violations. Throughout the mid-1940s, military intelligence logs frequently recorded unidentified slow-moving luminous orbs and high-speed disks drifting directly over the restricted airspaces surrounding Oak Ridge and the uranium mining supply hubs of the American Southwest. The correlation with fissile operations, statisticians and ufologists examining historical waves note a stark correlation, wherever raw uranium oxide was chemically refined. enriched or transformed into weapons-grade material. Anomalous aerial craft appeared with statistical regularity. The persistent presence of UAPs near uranium processing, storage, and testing sites suggests that whatever intelligence was observing human technological evolution was tracking the entire nuclear fuel cycle, starting long before a bomb is ever assembled, right down to the initial chemical refinement of uranium oxide. While the Battle of Los Angeles in February 1942 is widely remembered as one of the first major wartime UFO scares in the United States, military logs, maritime reports, and civilian records that contain notable anomalous encounters from the years and months leading up to it. Pre-1942 historical precedents. The 1941 Indian Ocean sighting. Pre-war anomalies on the maritime horizon. The September 1941 encounter aboard the Polish merchant vessel SS Pułaski stands as a fascinating maritime prelude to the modern era of unidentified aerial phenomena. Occurring just months before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent Battle of Los Angeles, this deep-water sighting highlights how anomalous encounters were occurring in isolated geopolitical zones long before the term flying saucer entered the global lexicon. In the autumn of 1941, the global oceans were volatile operational theaters. Merchant vessels, ocean liners converted into troop transports, and Allied cargo ships were navigating dangerous waters under strict blackout conditions. The SS Pułaski, a transatlantic passenger and cargo liner operated by the Polish Merchant Navy, was caught up in the global diaspora of the war, frequently utilized to transport Allied military personnel, refugees, and British troops across imperial shipping lanes, including the Indian Ocean corridor connecting the Middle East, India, and Africa. Crews and military passengers alike maintained round-the-clock watches. The looming threat of Axis surface raiders, long-range German U-boats, and Japanese naval expansion meant that bridge lookouts were exceptionally attuned to any deviation on the horizon or in the sky. According to historical accounts preserved in early ufological chronologies and maritime folklore archives, the sighting unfolded over an extended duration, separating it from fleeting optical illusions or falling meteors. Two sailors on watch, alongside an accompanying British military officer, observed a massive self-luminous green globe that appeared to manifest out of the open ocean airspace. The object was estimated to be roughly half the apparent size of a full moon, radiating a steady, intense emerald luminescence. Rather than flashing across the sky or executing a ballistic arc like a shooting star, the globe matched the exact speed, heading, and vector of the SS Pułaski. It maintained a locked parallel course alongside the vessel for over an hour. The object made no sound, left no exhaust trail or vapor wake, and displayed behavior entirely detached from known aviation technology of 1941. Its steady, patient pacing of a troop transport suggested an intelligence gathering or monitoring posture rather than a random natural phenomenon. The Pułaski incident, alongside contemporaneous pre-war radar anomalies and localized reports, demonstrates that anomalous aerial phenomena were actively shadowing global shipping lanes and military buildups before the atomic bomb or the post-war wave of 1947. These early encounters underscore a continuous underlying baseline of high strangeness, suggesting that the watchers were already mapping human military mobilization on the eve of global conflict. Pre-war U.S. West Coast radar anomalies, the 1940 to 1941 electronic shadow over the Pacific. The rapid expansion of the United States military's early warning radar grid along the Pacific coastline between 1940 and 1941 represents one of the most critical yet overlooked chapters in early electronic space defense intelligence. As the shadow of global conflict loomed over the Pacific theater, the U.S. Army Signal Corps and Coast Artillery (CA) raced to establish an electronic shield from the Washington state border down to Southern California. Yet, almost as soon as these vacuum tube systems hummed to life, radar operators began logging ghostly, anomalous echoes that defied the limits of contemporary aviation and sparked quiet, high-level intelligence debriefs. To understand why these radar anomalies are historically significant, one must examine the state of radar technology on the eve of World War II. Operating on a frequency band around 100 to 130 MHz VHF, the SCR-270 was America's premier long-range early warning radar system. Famous for its later, tragic, Rollhead Pana radar station during the attack on Pearl Harbor, these massive truck-mounted systems were deployed to key coastal bluffs, headlands, and naval approaches along the West Coast starting in 1940. These early systems were notoriously finicky. They suffered from ground clutter, atmospheric ducting, where temperature inversions bend radio waves over the horizon, and interference from local electrical grids. Consequently, military doctrine trained operators to immediately write off erratic, high-speed, or intermittent returns as calibration errors, side lobe reflections, or flocks of birds. Despite the standard bureaucratic dismissal of ghost echoes, unclassified summaries and declassified intelligence briefs from the Western Defense Command reveal that certain radar targets could not be easily explained away by atmospheric interference. Operators at coastal stations in Washington, Oregon, and California tracked targets, moving at speeds that far exceeded the maximum performance of 1940-era propeller aircraft. While top-tier fighters of the era maxed out around 300 to 400 miles per hour, these anomalous returns occasionally registered ground speeds calculated in the high hundreds or thousands of scale-equivalent knots, executing sudden vectors that defied aerodynamic inertia. The clusters of unexplainable returns typically originated far out over the open ocean, well beyond the operational range of any known Japanese carrier-based aircraft or long-range reconnaissance seaplane, such as the Kawanishi H-6K Mavis. They would sweep inward toward the continental shelf, only to abruptly vanish off scope or perform hairpin turns over deep water. Whenever base commanders scrambled interceptor aircraft such as -30s or early -38s to investigate these high-speed radar tracks, pilots routinely encountered empty skies. The targets existed purely in the electronic domain, or moved with such stealth and velocity that physical interception was impossible. The existence of these unverified briefs highlights a profound psychological and institutional dilemma within the pre-war American military apparatus. In 1940 and 1941, military intelligence was desperate to avoid mass panic or the logistical nightmare of repeated false alerts along a vital civilian and industrial coastline. Dismissing strange radar blips as equipment malfunction was an institutional defense mechanism. Despite official dismissals, the persistence of these fast-moving, untracked profiles laid the technological groundwork for the military's panic during the Battle of Los Angeles in February 1942. The operators manning the scopes in 1942 were reacting not just to the immediate trauma of Pearl Harbor, but to nearly 2 years of tracking phantom, high-speed echoes sliding silently out of the Pacific fog, proving that an unrecognized technological presence was evaluating America's defense perimeter, long before the first atomic bomb was ever forged. The reason the Battle of Los Angeles triggered such a massive, explosive response wasn't just the appearance of an unknown object in the sky. It was the cumulative tension of a nation at war. Just weeks prior, December 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor shattered America's sense of continental isolation. On February 23, 1942, just 36 hours before the Los Angeles air raid, a Japanese I-17 submarine surfaced near Santa Barbara, California, and shelled an oil refinery. When radar operators picked up an unidentified target tracking toward the Los Angeles coast on the night of February 24 to 25, 1942, the military and civilian population were already primed for an attack, turning a dark, anxious sky into a historic artillery barrage. Addressing whether any major scientific meetings concerning the atomic bomb or plutonium extraction took place in Los Angeles during February 1942. No, there were no major scientific meetings concerning the atomic bomb or plutonium extraction held in Los Angeles in February 1942. While Southern California was consumed by wartime blackouts and the ante-level panic of the Battle of Los Angeles that month, the architects of the Manhattan Project were gathered thousands of miles away. The intellectual and logistical heartbeat of atomic research was centralized in the Midwest and East Coast, specifically at the University of Chicago's newly formed Metallurgical Laboratory and Columbia University, leaving Los Angeles strictly as a theater of military defense rather than nuclear physics. While Southern California was in a state of extreme military panic that month, due to the coastal blackouts and the Battle of Los Angeles. The actual scientific hubs of the nascent Manhattan Project were geographically centralized elsewhere. The University of Chicago: In late January and February 1942, physicist Arthur Compton officially organized the Metallurgical Laboratory, Met Lab, at the University of Chicago. This became the primary center where research on nuclear chain reactions and plutonium production was centralized. Around January and February 1942, while Arthur Compton was organizing the Metallurgical Laboratory at the University of Chicago, there were no prominent, widely publicized UFO or UAP sightings recorded directly over Chicago or centered around the university campus. During this exact window, the focus of high strangeness and wartime aerial panic was almost entirely concentrated thousands of miles away on the American West Coast. As the country braced for potential Axis attacks following Pearl Harbor, the Pacific coastal corridors experienced intense radar tracking of unidentified echoes and the massive civilian-military blackout tension that culminated in the Battle of Los Angeles on February 25, 1942. The scientific work happening in secret at the University of Chicago and other Met Lab sites remained entirely focused on the theoretical and chemical foundations of nuclear chain reactions. Well before the post-war wave of anomalous sightings drew a visible line between atomic facilities and unexplained sky phenomena. Columbia University: Research into uranium isotope separation, gaseous diffusion, was heavily concentrated in New York under Harold Urey. During the early 1940s, while Harold Urey and his team at Columbia University in New York were leading the top-secret research into uranium isotope separation, gaseous diffusion, there were no major officially documented UFO or UAP sightings centered directly over the New York campus or Manhattan itself. While the skies over New York City were heavily guarded, blacked out, and swept by coastal defense searchlights and radar networks due to wartime submarine threats in the Atlantic, civilian and military reports of anomalous aerial phenomena during this precise 1942 window were heavily concentrated elsewhere. The psychological and military flashpoints for high strangeness during early 1942 remained firmly anchored on the Pacific coast, driven by radar anomalies and the anti-aircraft panic of the Battle of Los Angeles. Much like the academic hub at the University of Chicago and the Berkeley Rad Lab, Columbia University's secret atomic research operated completely behind closed doors. The convergence of widespread UAP sightings over America's primary atomic and uranium-producing sites, such as Oak Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos, did not erupt into public and military intelligence logs until the conclusion of World War II and the watershed summer wave of 1947. Therefore, while Los Angeles was making headlines for anti-aircraft fire and wartime radar alarms in February 1942, the high-level scientific conferences shaping the atomic bomb and plutonium extraction chemistry were taking place in the Midwest and on the East Coast. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.